Every day, the world around you is filled with noise. People arguing, panicking, overreacting, and making decisions driven entirely by feeling. And if you are not careful, that emotional current pulls you right along with it. Most people never realize how rarely they actually think. They react, they feel first, and then they build reasons around those feelings afterward, convinced the entire time that they are being completely rational. But they are not thinking, they are justifying. And there is a profound difference between the two. The moment you treat a feeling as a command, your thinking stops and your reacting begins. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. He did not mean emotions are wrong. He meant emotions are information, not instructions. Feeling something strongly does not make it true. Feeling something urgently does not make it important. And this single misunderstanding is responsible for more poor decisions than almost any other mistake a human being can make. Think about how easily one piece of bad news can hijack an entire day. One frustrating message, one harsh comment, one unexpected disappointment. Suddenly your focus disappears, your decisions become impulsive, and everything you planned collapses. Not because the situation was catastrophic, but because the emotional response was allowed to grow larger than the actual problem. This is not weakness. It is simply what unmanaged emotion does to human judgment. And it happens to nearly everyone. The difference between people who think clearly under pressure and those who collapse into reaction is not intelligence. It is the habit of creating space between what happens and how you respond. That space is where actual thinking lives. When something happens, most people immediately move toward interpretation. They decide what the event means, who is at fault, how serious it is, and what must be done, all within seconds, almost entirely based on feeling. Clear thinkers do something different. They pause. They ask whether their first interpretation is accurate or whether emotion is filling in gaps that evidence should be answering. This pause is not passive. It is one of the most powerful things a mind can do. Epictetus taught that it is not events that disturb people, but the judgments they form about those events. Two people can face identical situations and experience completely different internal realities based entirely on how they interpret what happened. One sees an obstacle and feels crushed. Another sees the same obstacle and feels curious. The circumstance is identical. The thinking underneath it is entirely different. And that thinking is a choice, one that most people never realize they are making. To think clearly, you must first become aware of your own patterns of interpretation, because most people carry deeply ingrained mental habits they have never examined. They catastrophize small inconveniences. They personalize events that have nothing to do with them. They assume the worst about situations that are genuinely uncertain. These habits feel like logic because they have been practiced so long they become automatic. But automatic is not the same as accurate. And this is where most people quietly lose the ability to see things as they truly are. Here is something even more dangerous. In emotionally charged environments, you can absorb someone else's emotional state without realizing it is happening. Human beings are wired for social connection, and social connection often means emotional synchronization. When someone near you is anxious, your nervous system begins responding to that anxiety. When the people around you are panicking, your brain registers danger, even if no real danger exists. The emotion spreads like weather, invisible and powerful, shaping perception before reason has a chance to engage. This is why clear thinking in chaotic environments requires deliberate anchoring. You must consciously return to what you actually know, separated from what the atmosphere is suggesting. Ask yourself what the facts are, independent of how people are feeling about those facts. Ask whether the response around you is proportional to the actual situation. Ask whether the urgency is real or simply manufactured by collective emotion looking for somewhere to land. These questions feel counterintuitive when everything around you is accelerating. But speed without direction is simply chaos with momentum. There is another habit that quietly destroys clear thinking, and it is one almost no one talks about. The need to have an immediate opinion about everything. People feel enormous social pressure to respond instantly, to have a position, to react in real time. This pressure intensifies when others are watching, when conflict is present, or when strong emotion is running through a group. Silence feels like weakness. Hesitation looks like confusion. And so people perform certainty they do not actually possess. But forming a conclusion before you have enough information is not confidence. It is theater. The wisest people throughout history were known for being slow to conclude and deliberate intention. Not because they lacked conviction, but because they understood that conclusions formed under emotional pressure are almost always incomplete. They would rather understand something accurately later than misunderstand it immediately. Notice how differently a situation appears 24 hours after it happens compared to how it felt in the moment. The conversation that seemed devastating the night before often becomes manageable by morning. The decision that felt obviously necessary in the heat of the moment frequently looks impulsive with even a small amount of distance. This is not coincidence. Time reduces the intensity of emotion while increasing access to reason. They move in opposite directions, and this is something you can use deliberately. When you cannot afford to wait, the next best option is to slow your physical response. Lower your voice. Breathe more slowly. Release the tension in your shoulders. These are not simply calming techniques. They are signals sent directly to your own nervous system, communicating that the situation does not require emergency thinking. And emergency thinking, while essential for survival, is a catastrophic tool for navigating the complex problems of real life. It is fast, narrow, and almost entirely reactive. Most modern problems do not require survival thinking. They require something quieter and considerably more precise. Here is the insight that changes everything once you truly absorb it. One of the greatest obstacles to clear thinking is not ignorance. It is wanting something to be true so strongly that you begin selecting only the evidence that confirms it. This is not dishonesty in the way most people imagine. It is simply how emotion shapes perception without your permission. If you desperately want a plan to succeed, you will interpret ambiguous signals as encouragement. If you are afraid something will fail, you will notice every detail that seems to confirm that fear. Neither response is thinking. Both are emotional filtering wearing the costume of logic. The people who think most clearly are not the ones who are never wrong. They are the ones who discover their errors faster because they are actively searching for them rather than defending against them. They hold their own conclusions lightly. They treat their beliefs as working hypotheses rather than protected identities. That single distinction separates genuine clarity from the comfortable illusion of it. True clear thinking also requires willingness to sit with uncertainty. Most people find uncertainty deeply uncomfortable, so they rush to fill it with a conclusion, any conclusion, simply to escape the tension of not knowing. But premature certainty is not understanding. It is anxiety management pretending to be thought. The most effective thinkers have developed what might be called a tolerance for ambiguity. They can hold an open question without immediately forcing it toward resolution. They understand that the quality of your eventual answer depends entirely on how long you were willing to remain genuinely uncertain before deciding. There is also something critical that almost no one considers when they think about mental clarity. The environment you constantly expose your mind to shapes your baseline emotional state in ways that are largely invisible to you. If you consume information designed to provoke constant outrage, fear, and urgency, your nervous system gradually begins treating heightened emotion as its normal condition. And when heightened emotion becomes normal, genuine calm starts to feel unfamiliar. Stillness begins to feel like something is missing. And thinking, real thinking, which requires extended periods of quiet focus, becomes increasingly difficult to access. Choosing carefully what you expose your attention to is not avoidance. It is maintenance. A mind that is perpetually flooded with manufactured urgency loses the capacity to sit with a problem long enough to actually understand it. You begin skimming the surface of everything because depth requires the kind of patience that constant stimulation slowly destroys. Clarity is not a dramatic achievement. It is a quiet practice built through small, repeated choices made across ordinary moments. The choice to pause before reacting, the choice to question before concluding, the choice to listen before speaking, the choice to observe before judging. These are not passive behaviors. Each one is a deliberate act of intellectual discipline in an environment specifically designed to prevent it. Now consider what happens inside relationships and conversations when emotional thinking takes over. Most people believe that the louder and more emotional an argument is, the more important the underlying issue must be. But intensity is not the same as significance. Some of the most emotionally charged arguments are about the least important things, while the decisions that quietly shape an entire life receive almost no emotional weight at all. This imbalance is not random. Emotion amplifies whatever is immediately visible and reduces sensitivity to whatever is gradual or distant. This is why people can argue passionately about small daily frustrations while completely overlooking patterns that are slowly dismantling something they genuinely value. When you learn to think clearly, you begin noticing this asymmetry everywhere. You start recognizing when a conversation has become more about emotional release than genuine problem solving. You identify when urgency is being manufactured to prevent careful consideration. You see when agreement is being socially pressured rather than logically earned. And once you can see these dynamics, they lose most of their power over you. The people who remain clear when everything around them is confused are not somehow free from emotion. They feel everything others feel: frustration, fear, disappointment, excitement, doubt. The full range of human experience moves through them exactly as it does through everyone else. The difference is that they have learned to let emotion inform their thinking without allowing it to replace their thinking. They feel the frustration, and they use it to identify what genuinely matters to them. They feel the fear, and they use it to determine where real risk exists versus where imagination has taken over. They feel the excitement and they allow it to add energy while remaining alert to the way excitement can make danger look like opportunity. Emotion becomes a tool rather than a master, and that single shift changes the quality of every decision you make. There is a deeper truth underneath all of this, one that most people only discover after experiencing the consequences of emotional thinking in the areas of life that matter most. Clarity is not a cold, detached intellectual state. It is actually a form of respect. Respect for the complexity of situations. Respect for the people involved. Respect for the consequences of decisions that are made without sufficient understanding. When you react emotionally without thinking, and you are essentially saying that your immediate feeling matters more than the actual reality you are dealing with. And reality has a way of correcting that assumption, usually at significant cost. Clear thinking is also ultimately a form of courage. It takes courage to pause when everyone around you is reacting. It takes courage to say you need more time when the social pressure demands an immediate response. It takes courage to acknowledge that your first interpretation might be wrong, especially when emotion has already convinced you it is obviously right. Most people avoid this work not because they lack intelligence, but because genuine thinking is uncomfortable. It means tolerating uncertainty. It means discovering you were mistaken. It means resisting the emotional satisfaction of reacting immediately and instead accepting the quieter, slower discipline of understanding first. But every time you choose the harder path, something accumulates. Your judgment becomes more trustworthy. Your decisions begin reflecting reality more accurately. The gap between what you think is happening and what is actually happening gradually closes. And the relationships, opportunities, and outcomes in your life begin reflecting that clarity in ways that compound over time. The world will always offer you reasons to react without thinking. Emotional environments will always create pressure to match their urgency. Other people will always present their interpretations with a confidence that can feel indistinguishable from certainty. But your thinking is yours, entirely yours, and protecting it, defending that quiet space between what happens and how you respond, is one of the most important responsibilities you will ever carry. The people who change their lives are rarely those who were the most emotionally reactive in difficult moments. They are the ones who develop the unusual ability to remain clear precisely when clarity was hardest to maintain, who asked better questions when others were shouting answers, who chose understanding over the temporary relief of immediate reaction. That capacity does not arrive fully formed. It is built slowly through practice, through failure, through the repeated choice to pause one more time before concluding. But once it becomes part of how you move through the world, you will find that you are no longer simply responding to life as it happens around you. You will begin, for the first time, to actually think your way through it, and that changes everything.